It's an honor to be here. I have a bunch of questions, and then later you can ask some of your questions. So here's my question, and it came to me, well, it's always come to me when I read your novels, but today I thought there are very few writers who can create a character, a place, and a moment instantly in dialogue. And you do it over and over again. Somehow the dialogue, we know exactly what they're doing, what the character's doing, what the place is like. Can you tell me how you developed your ear for dialogue?
Well, the line which identifies him might take weeks. You have weeks. You just feel you leave a blank there for his last line. It's that easy. I end sentences. I end scenes with my main character saying something, but it might take me weeks, and I go back and fill it in. I'm glad he thinks like that. He thinks so quickly. But this is writing. It's writing. It's filling up 78,000 words on paper. And to me, it's always been fun. Always. And if it's not fun, why do it? And it's gotta be that way. I have to please myself. I have to, and I hope, of course, that I please other people. But I want them to enjoy the book and get what I got, putting things into the book that I thought were funny or clever. I don't write seriously. I write always having fun. And
what about those days when you're not having fun?
Well, I don't know. I always have fun.
Oh.
I always have fun. But I make myself sit down every day and work. That's the whole thing. When I was working at an ad agency, I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go down to the basement, of all places, and write 2 pages of fiction. Westerns then, started with Westerns. And I did that all through the 50s, and I wrote 5 books, and well, it was productive. It was a very productive period. But I'm glad I did it, because if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't be sitting here. I mean, for 10 years, I sat there writing stories, getting better. I think with, what was the book I saw just a few minutes ago upstairs? I thought was my style had started to change. I started to get into the book a little bit more, and what was it? Valdez?
Yeah.
Valdez?
Yeah.
I thought my style began to change in that book. And I was so happy to see that I'd finally broken through. No one had to tell me. I knew it because I started writing imitating Hemingway until I found out he didn't have a sense of humor. And I was surprised. But I imitated other writers too. I imitated good writers. You don't want to imitate, you know. So the next guy was Richard Bissell, Bissell, and he set stories on the Mississippi River. And he taught me an awful lot with his simplicity, with his dialogue of these uneducated deckhands on these boats being pushed down the Mississippi River. And I loved them. I loved his stories. But he did it for about 5 or 6 years and then quit to write for, I think it was Horizon. You know, he just wanted to get out of it. He didn't like to work, but he was awfully good. A guy writes to me and he said, I would love to have a photograph of you, because I think you're one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. And then I thought, well, should I send him a picture or not? I don't want to, blow his dreams. And maybe I kind of like being the most beautiful he's ever seen, although his judgment is not one that I would go along with. So there are things like that that enter into it all the time. I like to sit down every day when I have an idea, when I have a book, and sit down and write until 6 p.m. Skip lunch, eat peanuts, and that's it. The time just flies. It's not, you're not writing 8 hours, no. And I answer the phone. I interrupt myself to answer the phone because a lot of times you like to interrupt yourself because you don't have an idea. So, but here's what I do. I write always from a point of view, whether it's the main character or a supporting character. A supporting character who's gotten interesting enough to have a point of view. And I never intrude. I never inject myself into the story that you're aware that I'm telling you about this guy or that woman. You won't ever hear that. I'm nowhere to be found. The whole book, I'm nowhere to be found. I never use a word that my characters wouldn't use, don't know either. I don't want to be trying to look smart. I want to tell a story.
Is it true that you don't outline and don't know the end of your book at all until you're writing it?
Right. Because maybe 50 years ago I outlined a book, maybe one. But you sit down for 2 weeks and think, what is this book about? 2 weeks, because in the next 6 months, you're going to have ideas, good ideas, better ideas. There was a scene where I thought of one where my main character, who originally was a government agent, and he quits to take pictures. He just wants to take pictures. And he's sitting in a wheelchair that a friend of his had stolen from an airport. And he's sitting there taking pictures of people coming off Miami Beach. And he'd pick the picture, then he would hand him a card that said you can have the picture for $5. Tomorrow I'll have it. If you want it, come by and get it. So he was sitting there. When I thought of the idea for a scene, he's sitting there, and then this guy comes up to him and says, "Let me see your camera." So he hands him the camera. And the guy turns around and starts to walk off with it. Then, of course, he's not crippled, he's not incapacitated in his chair. He flies out of the chair and beats the guy's head on the pavement. But then I waited about 5 years to write that scene. And then I thought about it, and this guy comes up and says, "Let me see the camera." And he hands it to him. He says, "Yeah, I like it. I think I'll take it," or something like that. Turns around, starts to walk away, and he stops. And he looks over his shoulder and says, "Here's this guy in a wheelchair. Can you walk?" And the guy in the wheelchair says, "Yeah, I can walk." And the guy edges back and puts the camera in his lap. It worked a lot better. When you're outlining in the beginning and you're putting down ideas, you'll go with the first one, Well, when you just let it happen, get the idea as you're writing, you don't know what's going to happen. I never know what's going to happen. I say the purpose of a scene is to impart some information, let's say. But there's always an opportunity for something else. There's always an opportunity to surprise the reader, is to surprise yourself. That's the best situation to get into, surprise yourself. Wow, that's a good idea. You know?
Do you often put books aside for a number of years like you did?
No.
No.
I just did recently, last week, put a book aside. Because the book just, I thought, the book took place in Arizona today, and 3 Indians. One Indian is in an Indian rodeo in Tucson, and he wins the bull riding event. He wins $4,000 and a new saddle. Whereas the big rodeo, you know, the guy will win $50,000 to $100,000 for bull riding. So, but he's very happy, and he's drinking and having fun when this immigration guy walks up to the 3 Indians having fun, and well, it goes downhill from there. So I thought, why do you want to write that story? It sounds too much like stuff that you've done. Then I went out to California, to the desert, and saw, what is it, you know, where all the rich live.
Perhaps.
No,
Palm Springs.
Palm Springs. Palm Springs. And I saw Palm Springs, and I thought, my, there's a lot going on here. There's even things that I've written about here going on here. And I never thought of Palm Springs. Am I nuts? Well, I've been thinking of Palm Springs since last week, and I'm going to set a book there for sure, because all of a sudden I'm excited after writing 45 books. I'm excited about the next one. Who's in it? And I can already see different people in it who are, you know, whose characters will not get along. But it's got to be something new and different for me, and it's going to be fun. I know it's going to be fun. So I'm going to do it. I don't know what the title is.
Well, that's okay.
But I'm going to bring Raylan into the story, because Raylan is an outsider to Palm Springs, and Raylan will see Palm Springs from Raylan's point of view. What does she think of it? Well, a lot of people think it's it. This is it. Get a $2 million house in Palm Springs, and you got it. And I believe that. It's true. Why not? But Raylan, he's from Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, so he's going to have different thoughts about it, not serious thoughts. He's not serious. You know, he likes moonshine.
So Raylan's going to Palm Springs. Is that what we're hearing? When you reached into your pocket, I thought you were going to take out a pen and start looking. I got nervous, but
I thought, you know, if I even think a title thing, Raylan in Palm Springs, it's not a title.
no.
But it's not bad.
I'll let you have that. Do you mind? I'd like to talk to you very briefly about your 10 famous rules for writing. Not everybody knows them, but if I mention them like the one sentence, would you respond to it? These are your 10 rules. Okay, the first rule is never open a book with weather.
A lot of books open with weather. And you can feel the author, he's getting into the book, and he wants to do just a little bit more about weather. You know, and he overdoes weather. And the reader's waiting, hey, is there anything going to happen in this book? Are there any people in it? Just it's raining all the time? And because I think of when I mentioned weather one time in a book, it was in South Florida, and this guy who owned a motel was having an awful lot of trouble. It's some bad guys. And he walked down to the beach, and it was drizzling. It was just drizzling. And he looked up at the sky and he said, "Fuck," as loud as he could. And that was how I handled weather. And you got this feelings completely.
Okay, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, 2.
I don't like to write about weather.
2, avoid prologues.
Well, why put a prologue? The writer thinks, I'm going to get people interested in this book by telling them something that happened to somebody in the past. Why go to all that trouble? If it's any good, just throw it in anywhere it wants. Start the book and get going with it.
I have three prologues to scratch out. Okay. 3, never use a verb other than said to carry dialogue. I'll let you get a drink first, and I think this is an excellent rule. But he said, she said.
Well, verbs other than said call attention to themselves. It's the sound, he muttered. Or when you tag on an adverb, he muttered. Any ly adverb. I can't even do it. But it occupies space. It occupies valuable space right in the middle of somebody saying something, exchanging an idea with somebody, and you're mucking it up with ly words. That's the whole thing.
Is it also, if you haven't said it in your dialogue and you're so insecure as to have to modify it, that we should avoid them as well? Yes?
Well,
He said, sort of scaredly. Terrible joke. Terrible. Okay, go on.
So, because Mary McCarthy she wrote a sentence which was a question, and at the end of it was, she asseverated. So I had to go look it up. I don't know why, but I did, because I was lost from the story. I forgot what one it was. But I've read her. I've read probably everybody, looking for somebody I could learn from.
Well, that was 4, was never use the adverb to modify the verb. So we'll move on to number 5. Keep your exclamation points under control. You're allowed no more than 2 or 3 per 100,000 words of prose.
Exclamation points are not used for exclamations. You see that in books all the time. If you have a real exclaimer, all right, put the exclamation mark after it. But avoid the exclaimer if you can. Keep the people smarter than screaming at each other. Huh?
6, never use the words suddenly or all hell broke loose.
There's a number of writers that I've read over the past few years, famous, popular writers, use suddenly and all hell broke loose over and over. Well, I should say over and over. They use that's enough.
They probably exaggerate.
Oh,
Yeah. Number 7, use regional dialect patois sparingly.
well,
I'm about to break into one. Go on. No,
that
sorry.
speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
8, avoid detailed descriptions of characters.
Well, there are certain writers who a character is introduced on a certain page, and then for the next several pages, the character is described physically and every which way. And the story stops. You can say the character has blonde hair, but then later on you can throw something else in. You don't have to stop the story and put it all in one place. But I don't describe characters that much. It's not, because when you meet a character, you form a picture. Before I've even described in any way the character, you see the character, and I don't want to interfere with that. I don't want to get in the way. You like this, but you like the looks of this person. And this happens a lot in your reading, if you remember.
Well, this is related, number 9. Don't go into great detail describing places and things.
Well, go ahead to the next one.
Actually, number 10 is my favorite rule, which is try to leave out the part that readers tend to skip.
And you can do that. Easily.
Yeah,
But there's a place where the writer, all of a sudden, he believes he's a writer. And the page becomes filled with words. And maybe he's making a point, but you don't care about the point he's making. You want the story to move on.
You say at the end here, my most important rule is one that sums up the 10, which is what you're talking about. If it sounds like writing, I rewrite it.
That's hard. Yeah.
Is it when you suddenly are feeling your personality in the book, or you're looking over your shoulder at your work, the self-conscious thing that you're talking about?
I think that's it, that it does look like you're trying so hard to write. That, no, I don't want any feeling. I don't want any feeling that, from the reader, that I'm writing a book. I want to just, however it works, I'm not sure I can explain it, but I want the reader to be so immersed in it, without any help from me, that the reader goes along with it, likes it, and rides with the story.
Well, I had read these rules a while ago, and then I reread them before I started reading Raylan, the new book, and I was so aware of the way things are sort of not speeding along, but moving along in the dialogue, and the reader is sort of getting these people without you telling us. It's almost all in the way they speak and speak to each other and how they react to each other.
Yeah. Exactly, which is what I rely on in all of my books, is dialogue. And it gets me off the hook. I don't have to describe how they're talking or what they're thinking, or here's his line of dialogue, and you know who he is. If he's smart or dumb or whatever, you know who he is by the way he talks. And to me, that's the simple way to do it.
Yeah, well, that was the first question I was asking, which had to do with dialogue. I skipped over a few things this is a very basic thing that, which might be of interest to people, that you write your books in longhand, right? And then go to the typewriter, but no computer.
No, I don't have anything. I don't have email. I don't want email. Why would I want email?
Do you find that there's something about when you're writing with a pen or a pencil on paper that has it? Well, does it change when you type it on when you
No.
type? No, it doesn't.
No,
Really.
not at all.
Oh, okay. But do you revise a lot or edit a lot?
I write, I think 3 pages to get one.
Okay.
Yeah, I revise complete as I do it. I don't go all the way to the end and then try and rewrite. No,
So when you're
I
at,
don't think that would work.
but when you're at the end, you wouldn't do like an overall rewrite, editing?
No.
'Cause,
When
yeah.
I get to the last page, it's done.
That's good. Okay. And, yeah, because usually when you do get to the end of something and you read it, you hate it. At least, well, not I wouldn't. Yeah. Notice how articulate I am. I'm going backwards a little bit because I was so curious as to why Western novels and what you think those early books taught you in terms of creating you as a writer.
I read Westerns because I liked Western movies. I loved Western movies. There were a bunch of good ones in the 40s and 50s. So I thought, start writing a Western. Just do some research and get into it. I subscribed to, I forgot what it was. A good magazine, can't think of it now. And I researched. I did a lot of research about Apaches, Geronimo, people like Geronimo, who were fascinating to me, and the generals like Crook, who was on the border looking for Geronimo. And so I read all that and I used it in my books. I liked Western movies, but I didn't like Westerns as they appeared in pulp magazines. Dime Western, 10-story Western. They all paid 2 cents a word, and that's what I ended up in primarily. I would sell one to Argosy, which paid $1,000, and I'd sell the next 6 to Dime Western or one of the others that paid 2 cents a word. What was the one? 310 to Yuma. I got $90 for it. 4,500 words. Then it's made into a movie. It was a good movie that maybe cost at the most $2 million. Then it was made again for probably $40 million, you know. And they didn't pay me anything until my agent complained. What are you doing, just taking this story and making a big movie out of it? I liked the second movie, except that it didn't make sense. But it was full of thrills and chills, and I like that.
So speaking of the research, I wondered how much research you do. I mean, in the new book, you must have done a little research about people stealing human organs. Yes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fun stuff.
My researcher is sitting right here.
Oh, is that great?
Yes, who gives me countless
Take a bow.
facts. Things and he gives me stacks of information,
Right.
you know. But I read it all. I do. I have to, because there's always good stuff in it, always. So Greg's kept me going for, what, 30, how many years? 32 years, huh?
There's always a question of how much research how much of that information you can use in your work before it overwhelms the work. I mean, I asked you that question, but I didn't feel research in the book. In other words, I don't feel that I'm being told or taught about people who steal organs and sell them. I mean, in fact, it's so shocking when it opens and that it feels brand new. So, how much do you, after you're reading the stacks that Greg gets for you, is it just sort of like?
I hadn't read it. I hadn't read any of that.
Oh, you hadn't?
No. And Justified said, well, we've done body parts.
Oh.
And I said, well, I didn't see it. When did you do it? Or I didn't do it. Maybe somebody else did it, but that doesn't count. So I did body parts, and I thought it was good. And they're going to do body. Right now they're going to do body
Because I was curious how much of that will end up on Justified.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. How much do you have to, I know you are a producer, an executive producer on the show. Does that mean you have any hands-on?
No,
No.
none. None. And I don't want it.
No.
I don't want to know what they're doing.
And you don't want to write scripts anymore?
No. I quit in '93.
How many, you wrote quite a few though, right?
I don't know how many. Maybe a dozen.
Is it the collaborative nature and the...
Oh, God.
Yeah.
With movie people, studio people who really don't know what they're doing. Oh,
And it's good that you're doing that. So,
sure is.
But how do you, but with Justified, so you don't have anything to do with it. How do you feel they have interpreted your
I
story?
think they're great. I think all those stories have real drive to them, and everybody's having fun. You know, that's the main thing. They're all having fun.
And are you gonna write more Raylan books? More?
Well, I'm gonna send Raylan out to Palm
Well,
Springs.
that's
He deserves some.
He does deserve a break, particularly after this book. He needs something glamorous. Hold on, I could turn it over, but I'm not yet ready to turn him over, you know. I just wanted to come back to one thing to understand it, because you said before that you always write from a character's point of view to create the book. Do you find your way to that point, or it is what sets the book in motion, or or do you find it along the way to creating the book?
You go down 4 spaces, and you're with somebody else's point of view. I think it's that easy.
Oh, okay. So you're following the different routes, and then you know the one to take.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, Walt.
Which film do you think has been truest to your work,
Which film is
Which film has been truest to your work?
to your vision of your work?
I think the one Tarantino did. I was surprised.
That's Jackie Brown.
Yeah,
The Rum Punch.
yeah. But I liked, I liked others. But I think that he stayed closer to the story than I think anybody, which surprised me. Because he likes to just, take off.
Others.
Me?
Yes.
Yes, your dialogue is so exceptional. Do you do anything like read it out loud to hear it, or put it on a tape recorder? Or
Everybody
how?
hear that about the dialogue? If Mr. Leonard reads it out loud, if he tapes it, or how do you listen to your own dialogue if that's possible?
Well, whenever someone mentions my dialogue, that it seems so, say, true, or whatever, I say to the person, don't you hear things in your head? Don't you hear people talking in your head? That's all it is. You use that you've got.
Hi. Yeah, you mentioned in a book earlier where you felt your style was changing. Around what book, or is there a book where you figured you've hit your kind of current style?
Well, by the time I finished the Westerns, because they're all compiled, they're 30 Westerns in one big book, and I think they all sound pretty much the same. But you'll see that I'm learning something as I went along. But then when I quit Westerns, I don't know, it was after that I finally began to develop what I figure is my sound. And it's pretty flat, and it doesn't show off at all. It's simple writing. Simple declarative sentences telling a story, I think, at least I've tried that.
Do you have a book that you feel closest to, or that I know it's a kind of Well, I am a fan. I was going to say it's a fan question. So.
I like all my books. I really do. And when I hear a critic say, "Well, it's good that finally he came back," you know, like I came back to writing something good with Raylan, for example, that, you know, the ones before weren't as good. I said, where was he? What was he doing? I thought they were good. I liked all of them.
That's good. Can you bring the mic over to Noreen there?
I have a question about Raylan. When you were writing Pronto, did you know that you would, did you envision writing the rap? Did you know that you would, that Raylan would be a character who would recur? Or were you just writing that one book and then later on decided to do
Yes, I was just writing that one book. And I don't think he developed too much in Pronto. Maybe he did, I don't know, but I must have liked him a lot to pick him up again, you know? And those were made into movies, television movies.
I feel, can you guys hear me? I feel like your women characters are really, really great women characters, especially for a man to be writing women characters, and I wonder if you could talk about that.
There was a woman that I knew with the Detroit News, I think, who reviewed one of my books, and she said that my feeling of women seems to be very close to Mickey Spillane's. And I thought, where'd she get that? There's no similarity. But then I thought, I'm going to pay more attention to my women characters, and I did. And then I'd start with women characters rather than drag one in. Here's the woman in the story who turns her ankle finally. You know, they all, it's a Western, they all turn their ankle. So I would start with the woman, and I always liked my women, like Killshot. They wanted to change, they always wanted to change the ending to make the guy the hero. I said, no, the girl is the one. And I love all that.
She's one of the ones I was thinking about. I remember her handwriting analysis course that she took, and she changes the way she writes when she's feeling a little depressed.
She changed her, yes, she
Yeah.
did, so that, what was the purpose of changing? So that she would like herself. Yeah, I think.
Did you get anything from your career in advertising that?
No.
Yeah, you talked about your research, and I read Ray one, and obviously you can see it in the background for the organ ceiling, right? But when it comes to whether your characters are set in Detroit or they're in Florida or they're in Hollywood or the flat style, okay, but it's so distinct, the vibe for each of those cities, each of those areas, and the different kinds of characters. And I wonder, do you spend time with some of the kinds of people that you write about, or have you? Has that helped inform your style?
I think I probably have spent time with all of them, sure, types of people like that. I don't remember that I've made up any that I didn't know. You know, I mean, I've lived in Memphis, Dallas, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, born there, and Detroit. There are a lot of different sounds in all those towns, you know. That's the thing. I love the sound of speech.
You can tell, you just have fun with the vibe
Yeah,
of each of those.
yeah.
And yet without any patois or accent.
Well, there's some patois.
Okay. Over here.
You spoke about your rules for writing. I was wondering if you have one or more rules for writing about sex.
Writing about sex? That was the question.
Yeah, writing about sex was the question.
Oh.
Are there rules for writing about sex?
I don't know, but I think Graham Greene was probably the best. And it would be 3 lines, and it would just sock you. It was a great line, always. You don't have, what I've usually done in sex scenes, I've written them from a particular point of view. And it's from the point of view of the guy who can't believe he's in bed with this former movie star. Holy shit. It's like that. But it's always from somebody's point of view because that's the way I write. It's never my point of view. You don't know what I think.
Better not to have rules about sex.
Yeah.
More questions at the end?
You talked a little bit about your editing process. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, about editing as you go, and do you ever get stuck in going over and over an area, or?
Well, by the time I've got it the way I like it, the story, the writing, and then Greg comes. Greg comes with lists of questions, and he tells me legally what's going on in the book, or what illegally is going on in the book, and doesn't try to make me change it, but he informs me of the meaning of this particular scene, let's say, from a legal point of view. And I can accept that or throw it out. And I usually throw it out.
But that would be, you're saying in regard to legal issues, but what about your, in just sort of normal editing process as you're going along and you're editing or rewriting yourself? I think you were more thinking about the actual process of how you go about that.
Well, if it takes 3 pages to get one, you know I'm changing a lot of words. Just getting down closer to what I think is the story, or the story from somebody's point of view is, I don't know how to describe it. It's, I mean, I'm asked questions about how I write, and I think, well, doesn't everybody think this way? No. Why, do you want to make it sound like writing? You don't want to make it, you don't want to do that. But how can a literary writer not make it literary? Use words that I feel don't belong in the book because they are not natural to a character, or they are so natural to the character that who's they're all intelligent people. Is he interesting or not? It's like Mary McCarthy saying she is separated. Where do you go with that? You read that in a book. She is separated. Do you know these people?
So it is sort of, I would say that, like most writers, you're trying to get your words down and get them as clear as possible, but yours is also, it seems, like many perhaps, a subtractive method to get to exactly what it is, or as close to what you want to say without the, I don't want to say with the least amount of language, but with the correct amount of language, which would be less than where you're starting from. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I was just wondering, how would you say that the challenges in your career have changed from when you first started to, say, the middle of your career to now?
From what to what?
The challenges, how have the challenges in your career changed from, I guess, how they personally affect you from the beginning of your career to the middle of your career to how you are now? Do you mean the challenges in how now he Mr. Leonard can work with a book because of what's happened in his life and his career? Is that
I
it?
mean,
Or
in terms of like, what have you found to be the different challenges in your writing process as you've matured as a writer? And how has that changed and evolved over time?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you're right that you think differently when something happens. I read a book that I wrote in '79, and I think, where did this come from? I don't even remember the movement in the book and the attitude of the book. I don't write like that now. And I think, I want to get back into that. So I loved it. I loved it. It was a Western. '79, what was I doing still writing a Western then, you know? But then I gave it up. I didn't write it. I didn't rewrite that kind of story because, I don't know, I don't think about, but when I start to write, I'll read older books to get the you know, the rhythm of that kind of writing. This is my style. I want to get my style back on the page, and I have to reread something. It's not that apparent to me, so I have to reread things, and that helps a lot.
one more question.
Do all the books, or most of them, take approximately the same amount of time to write?
They used to take 4 months. Then they took 6 months. Now they take 8 months, 9 months. Because I don't want to repeat myself, you know, the same kind of scenes. So it gets harder. It gets a lot harder now. But I'm anxious to do the new.
I just want to, on top of that question, I know there's less, and not wanting to repeat yourself, how do you feel about writing continuing characters? I mean, is it familiar and easier, or is it more difficult to continue a character?
John D. McDonald was writing his 28th Travis McGee, and he said, "Oh my God, I don't think I can face this." You know, everybody's waiting for Travis to show up again. Well, I haven't had a continuing character as such, though I've had people who are in, you know, 3 books, at least 3 books. People I like. Raylan's going to be in. My agent says, don't put Raylan in another book because the people who do the show own him. I guess they do. I don't know. But we won't be able to sell it as a movie when they're using him. They own him for all sense and purposes. So, but I say, no, I don't care. I like him. I like him. I'm going to use him because it's going to be a better story. That's the main thing. Write a better story, not I have more control over this character. What does that prove? That's just Asian talk.